Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto. Today we have a great topic continuing in our buyer series. And now that you have identified a home that you are really interested in and would like to make an offer, what happens next?
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes when you say to us, Tom and Joanne, I would like to make an offer on this home. So Tom, what do we start with? Where do we start?
We start first on the MLS. We see if the broker has put up any attachments to the multiple listing service. Do you have the Title V in hand if there's a septic system or a well report? We look at that first. Then we go to the multiple listing service. They have a public records division. We look at that, make sure it's the same as the property. The next thing that Joanne and I want to do is we go to the town.
Yep.
We look at the town assessor's card. Then we go to mass land records. We look at the deed. We see if there's a GIS map. Can we see a map? Is there any wetlands? Is there anything that we should be aware of?
Easements on the property.
Easements on the property.
Yeah.
Those are kind of some due diligence things we want to do to make sure that the property is what the buyers are purchasing and what they intended to.
Yep.
The next thing is value. You know, in value for all of those people out there, if you haven't bought a house, the value is not established until the seller has a check in hand. So up until that point, there could be multiple values for a property, and we want to know what they are. So we always look at consumer sites like Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com. But the problem with those sites is that once a house is active on the market, those sites tend to correlate with that listing price. So they lose their effectiveness. Like when a house is not on the market, those what they call automated valuation methods, those kind of work a little bit better because they don't have a benchmark.
Right.
Once a benchmark's been established, they start to lose their efficacy. And so we have to find other ways to value the property. You know, one of the things I like to use is I use a software called RPR, which is Realtor Property Resources, which does create a valuation. So that's one of the models I use to kind of start benchmarking model. Joanne, what do you use for pricing?
I love to look at the statistics. So I tend to go into the multiple listing service and I will pick out relevant sales. Now, the one thing that's great is that between the two of us and the markets that we cover, we have seen a lot of the inventory.
Yes.
So when we're picking out relevant sales, they're typically a lot of the time homes we've been in.
Yes.
So we have more information than what the MLS will tell us on the surface. And so what I'll do is I like to go into the multiple listing service. I like to pick out the relevant sales and pull those out into a spreadsheet. I also like to run trending market reports. So what's the quarterly breakdown in the market that you're looking at? Let's look at a 5-year history. If you're unfamiliar, with the Massachusetts market, let's say you're moving from out of state, looking at a 5-year trend so that you can see where those numbers are. And that will give you everything from average sale price to price per square foot, ratio of sale, what the sale price was to the list price, and the number of units that are active under agreement sold in the last 12 months. We want to have all of these statistics so that we can get kind of that big bird's eye view picture of the market that you're looking at. And then we dial it down by getting more serious about those relevant properties.
Right.
So what are the things that we look at from the relevant sales?
Yeah, what is a relevant sale? It's a great question that a lot of people often ask us, and it has to do with proximity to the house, style, and time. So a relevant comparable sale will be the closest sale in time, in distance, and in style from the subject property. So if you're looking at a center entrance colonial in Concord that is on, let's say, Elsinore Street, and then you want to find a comparable for it, ideally, we'd like to find a center entrance colonial on Elsinore Street that sold last week.
Yeah.
If that typically
doesn't exist,
then we start going back with a distance. We go a quarter mile, a half mile, a mile away, and then we go time. We go a month, 2 months, 3 months. Maximum time we want to do is typically 3 months. So then we might move our distance a little bit. Maybe we go 2 miles. If within 2 miles we can't find anything, maybe we'll go back 4 months, 5 months. And we start to paint a picture of what a willing and able buyer was willing to pay for a property, how that compares to the subject property, and see if we can now predict the future reaction of a new buyer. That's kind of like that's what the listing agent's done. And now that's what we're doing as a buyer's agent. And that's kind of like the methodology,
Yep.
and that's like how you kind of identify relevant properties. But picking relevant properties is so critical. Last year, Joanne and I had an issue on an appraisal for one of our buyers, and the lead property the appraiser picked, it was a Central Entrance Colonial, and the lead property was a Cape. And I said, there are other Central Entrance Colonials. Why did you pick a Cape?
Yeah.
And then it was silence on the other side of the phone. And it's like, it's so critical to
Yep.
pick the right properties.
Yeah, and I think that the presentation of this information is important too, right? Because you don't want to get a bunch of, well, maybe you do want to get a bunch of spreadsheets from us. We can do that too. But a lot of people are visual learners, and where this isn't their full-time job, they interpret information differently than we do.
Right.
So what we do is we do our statistical analysis, and then we bring that statistical analysis into a great software called Moxie.
Yes.
And what Moxie can do is it can bring all the relevant properties with you, populate the photos so that you can see them, and put the relevant sales side by side so you can see what the differences are between them. And then we will offer our commentary on what we think the value range is of this home that you're looking at.
Exactly. And what I like about Moxie is that it's all web-based and it's real time. So if we send you a property and say there's an offer deadline. So say we went into the property on Thursday, went back on Saturday, and offers aren't due till Tuesday. If we send you this Moxie and a house that was pending sells on Monday,
Mhm.
it will automatically update and you'll have new, fresh information.
Mhm.
So what we then do is we give you this information of the range that the market predicts this house will sell for.
Mhm.
Then it's your decision as the buyer as to whether or not you want to stay within that range, go under that range,
Yep.
or potentially go over that range. Buyers sometimes say, I will pay over that range, even if that means that I have to potentially cover a shortfall if the appraiser does not agree with me.
Right.
Because in real estate, there are kind of three times where value has to be established. Once when an agent is getting that signed contract to put the house on the multiple listing service.
Mhm.
Once when the buyer is making an offer, and the final time when the appraiser is verifying the value. So we have to kind of understand that, and we talk to our buyers about that. And because we do this comprehensive process, I think in the last 36 months, Joanne and I have only had 2 issues with an appraisal.
Mhm.
One we were able to fight, and the other one we said to the buyer, "You're overpaying," and you have to understand that. And,
And they were okay
They
with
were
that.
okay with that because they wanted the property,
Mhm.
and that's really important. So go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so we love to use technology to bring you information, but there's strategy involved in this.
Yes.
So you have to assume that any other educated buyer out there is looking at the same information that you have. It's all public information.
Right.
So our thought is we're going to give you a range, and then we're going to talk about, what homes like this, how much over the asking price have they been selling for, over the last 12 months, over the last 6 months. And these data points are important because other buyers are looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we figure out how to reconcile between value and strategy and coming up with a place that feels really, really comfortable to you for an offering price. And that is going to be very specific to your particular scenario. If you were in a situation where you must close on a home, you are likely going to be willing to pay more for that house than somebody who's at the very beginning of their home search.
Correct.
So it's a great way to absorb information using the Moxie and then coming back together and discussing what makes the most sense for you. And when you decide on a strategy, there's more than just price, right, Tom?
100%. And I think that kind of leads into our next video that we'll be recording, which will be writing the offer
Yeah.
and really diving into strategy now that the pricing piece is established.
Mhm.
So if you like our content, please subscribe and stay tuned for the next buyer video. I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto. Cheers.